our final product is a written report. And so we have to do a lot of writing. We have to communicate in writing, try to express our thoughts, and try to make those thoughts to be clear, very specific. And so that's a very good point, because a lot of people think engineering might just be all about math and science, but there is a lot of that. But we still have to communicate, and whether that's communicating in the form of our written reports, how we create plans and specifications. There's a lot written. It's all written word and email correspondence, all that kind of stuff.
Because I'm hearing a lot of that whenever they tell somebody something from the report, then they back it up, they provide a lot of evidence and communicate all of those things as scientists. So I promise you, when we have you guys do that a lot, we're practicing these skills that you really use.
What would you prefer? You were there first.
Why is machines so tall? Like, have a big long
Okay, so we have these pieces of longer. Sometimes we will pull out of the ground several pieces that are attached to each other. It just makes it quicker for us to drill. And so we have to have a little bit of room. With the cables, you can see you'll attach the cable to run into the auger string. We call it an auger string, and then close it out. Kind of dirty. We could have cleaned it up for you, but this is what we call the lead auger. So that's the first auger we stick in the ground. And you can see the teeth. So that cuts the ground, cuts rock, it cuts the dirt. You can make those out. But then, so we drill this into the ground. And the way these flights are, we call these flights, the way they're designed, it brings the soil up to the ground. We'll drill this into the ground, then we'll put, this is a 5-foot long auger. Then after we put this in the ground, and we're saying we're drilling to 10 feet, put another 5-foot piece on, drill it into the ground, pull it out, and then drop our sample.
What's like the farthest you can go down?
You have more. 150?
150 feet?
150 feet, yeah. This depends on how hard the ground is. There are some rocks that we can't drill this way. We have other tools that are called rock core barrels, where we actually extract literally a tube of rock out of the ground. It's a tool that has a diamond impregnated bit, so it's very hard. Yeah, it's very sharp.
Oh, this is
This drills holes. Yeah. So we're really drilling the hole so that we can get down to the depth that we want to take a soil sample. So the soil sample I brought to you is kind of really the end result. This helps us. This allows us to get there.
Do you guys ever get like complaints from houses that are kind of close to here for being really loud?
Not this far away. But sometimes, we do our work in a lot of different environments. I mean, we do projects next to existing buildings and next to homes, and sometimes we try to be good neighbors. We try to show up after a certain time, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, so someone's not sleeping.
Do you have any ecological impact studies of the surrounding area for the sound or anything like that?
No, we don't. I mean, we're not that noisy, really. We don't think. I mean, but we have to be mindful of our neighbors and the places that we do our work. Yes.
I noticed when you got right there with where we put the table originally.
Yeah.
It smelled kind of strange.
Did it smell organic-y maybe or something like that? Is that a
No,
little bit
it's
Manure-y.
yeah.
That's what they were saying.
I'll be honest, it smelled like a lot of farts. And
That's probably a good way to describe it. You know what it is? It's the organic matter. Decay. It's decay.
And I don't really smell anything now. Like, do you ever? Does your noses ever get used to the smell out here? Like when you get here, do you smell it and then not smell it 15 minutes?
Yeah. So you may making an observation that maybe your nose is accustomed to the smell, and that's why you don't really smell it. But you know, in our business, we try to use different senses: smell, sight, feel.
Very good.
We usually don't try to eat the soil. There's some people that, you know, old timers might put it between their teeth, and if it's gritty, then it's more sandy. Yes, ma'am.
If you said that I can go like really far down, but that's not very.
You said they attach different, like they attach different.
So these, we just stick another piece on, and there's a pin that we put through this hole. There's a hole in the seam. Okay. So they're in 5-foot pieces. These guys work really hard.
Yeah,
Because they're handling these 5-foot pieces of steel in and out of the hole. They work really hard.
Have you ever hit anything important while drilling?
No, you want to talk about?
Have we hit anything important? Like a phone line or a gas line? So what we do as part of our business, before we drill, there's a service that's called OKI, one call. And they locate the utilities for us. And our goal is to not hit anything.
Oh, but every now and then.
Unfortunately, it does happen.
Yes, we do.
Sometimes things happen.
What are some other buildings that you guys have built? Like you're building this school.
Right. We've built some others, but many things. The new work that they did at the St. Francis Hospital, with that new tall tower. And so you can see how this was. Just kind of watch your. Let me kind of get this over here. So, split spoon. This is a spoon. It's split in two, so you can split it open like this. And I don't know if you could hear before you came up here. They were kind of driving something into the ground. Well, they're driving this into the ground. There's a piece that's not here, but it's called a shoe. Kind of looks like a tip. And so, by driving this sampler into the ground, we're collecting a soil sample, plus the number of blows that it takes to drive this sampler into the ground tells us about how strong the soil is, or how dense it might be. And so we're collecting all this information on what we call the field boring log, something like that. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll take this sample, we will cut it into a couple pieces, put it in a bag, put this sample tag, which tells us we collected that from a depth of 1/2 foot to 2 feet. And then we're going to bring that back to our office, and we're going to examine it. An engineer is going to look at it again. He's going to then determine if we need to run a test, what kind of test to run on the sample and on the soil. But you can kind of see.
So is this going to be closer to the top, and this will be closer down farther?
Exactly.
Okay. So it gets to the light.
Now this, let me back up. Sorry. This would be closer to the top, because this is the, yeah, so to tell you, you guys can kind of feel, that's kind of more silty and sandy like we were looking at up there.
Because no heat goes into it.
Right? And so we're going to do this. We'll probably take 5 or 6 more of these at different levels.
Does it ever like change like from like clay to like sand?
It does. Yeah. It does.
so cold?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? It's really kind of.
I bet because heat doesn't really get in through
It's
dirt.
the soil's
farther.
is an insulator, right? Soil insulates, and so this is in the kind of a damp and dark area. But
That's
yeah, so the soils can change, and so sometimes you'll actually see changes in this sample. And other times we have to watch as we're drilling, because as we're drilling, we're bringing up soil cuttings, and it'll have different colors, and we log samples or log the soils off of the drill cuttings. So this is a very common soil sample that we take. And what we might do is we're going to take this back over. You guys, have you seen enough of this? Okay. And then why don't you and I bring an auger kind of off?
Tight.
Can we touch it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best thing. In order to classify the soil, you have to touch it. You need to touch it. But my business is a hands-on business, and if you like to wear jeans to work and boots, you don't have to wear jeans and boots. Come out and get your hands dirty.
Perfect.
This is the kind of business that you might want to be in. So you can kind of see. One test we do to see if it's a clayey soil, you get a little more sample as you kind of roll it out. We call rolling it out into like into worms. So you can imagine what a worm looks like, and so you can see how this rolls out like it does. So there is clay in this soil, and it's pretty clayey. Okay. And so this would be the soil, and this is going to be real similar to the kind of the reddish colored soil that you see here. Now this is rock. This is going to be sandstone. Hard to break. Try to
But it does break.
It can break, right?
I can just break it with my fingers.
But you can kind of see if you were to kind of, rub it, it'll kind of break down into sand. Break down into sand. Okay. All right, okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So look at that. That's more like silt. And so take that. Try to do the same worm test.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
This feels like
Doesn't work.
sand.
There is some sand. There is some sand in it. Yep. It's sand and silt. It's kind of be a silty sand, sandy silt, something like that. And so all these materials, they behave differently. This is an interesting site from that perspective. There's a lot of different types of soil.
Or whatever. Kinetic sand.
Yeah,
Same thing.
So trying to identify the different layers of soil and their soil classification and their strength and density. And so we're going to drill to various depths. We can drill 5 feet or 150 feet. It just depends on what we might be doing. Here we're drilling about 15 to 30 feet, just depending. And so our goal is to drill through the soil and encounter rock. But we're taking soil samples at different levels. We're going to bring those samples, we're going to put those samples in a bag, and then we're going to bring them back to our laboratory, and then an engineer is going to sit down and examine the soils, look at our field notes. Then he's going to assign laboratory testing that's done in our laboratory, where we might test the moisture content of the soil, we might test the strength. We're going to determine if it's a clay or a silt, sand or gravel. And ultimately, we're going to complete a boring log like this. And then we're going to perform engineering analysis using this. And then we're going to make recommendations and develop a report.
When we look at this,
Is most of this silt?
Well, no. Well, you can see. So there is some silt. So this boring here was somewhere probably right up here off of the top corner. This boring here, I think, was closer to kind of right over here. And what's interesting, you can kind of see sometimes there's consistency and sometimes there's not. We're dealing with Mother Nature. Mother Nature is not very consistent a lot of times, and there can be a lot of things, a lot of changes. It has to do with the environment. The Arkansas rivers, just several hundred feet that direction, where you're going to find sand to 30 feet and then rock. And over here at the top side of the site, there's a rock basically at the surface of the ground. And so this is what we're doing here. And
this is really cool because I know we talk about like what stories do our graphs and our data tell us. And here, I mean, we can see that there is between these two sites a great difference in the amount of the silts that you find and then the clay, much more here than
if we talk elevation, here's an elevation. So the elevations are very similar.
So all those data pieces that we're doing in class, I mean, this is what it looks like when applied to something like this.
My business, mine is mostly computer. Besides working out in the field that much, I don't have any equipment. Well, I still think of it. We use a theodolite or a transit or a survey where we look through it and have a guy on the other end. That's more where we can just...
Hi, my name's Brad, and I work with a company called Terracon. And we are soil engineers. So we get involved with giving advice and recommendations on how to build the soil so the soil will support the buildings and support the pavements without falling down. And so we're a very specialized part of civil engineering. We're involved in almost every project that you see that's built, although you probably don't see us. We come in on the front end and we kind of do our work behind the scenes.
Can we make an introduction?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
My name is David Cobb, and I am actually not a civil engineer, but I work for Terracon Consultants in our in client development. So I work with our clients and all the different projects that we do and working and building those relationships that are so important in our community as we really help build a better and safer community.
And David is a good example where, you know, sometimes you think, well, I might not want to go into engineering specific, but you may like that world. And so, you know, you can find a world in marketing and accounting. There's a whole lot of other fields that are related to the engineering world that Brad and I work in the specifics with. What Brad's doing for us today is Brad is taking some soil borings, meaning that he's taking an open, and he'll explain all this, so I'm going to just tell you what he's doing it for. Okay? As we develop the site, one of our responsibilities as engineers is to make sure that when it rains, that the storm water that comes off of the hill after we place our building and our parking lots and our driveways and all that kind of stuff isn't coming off any faster than it was before we make our improvements, because that gets our neighbors mad, right? And so nobody likes to have a mad neighbor. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be creating a small dam, okay, or a levee. And to do that correctly, we need to know how the support of that levee is going to be held up with the soils below it, to make sure that it doesn't fail in some way. And that's what Brad is doing that investigation, and he'll make those recommendations to us, and then we'll do our design on top of it. So that's part of a levee system that'll set here, so that whenever it rains really hard, or even not so hard, the water will come off the side and pond back in amongst these trees here through the tailwaters up the hill, and set there and slowly drain off the side at the same rate that it was prior to us putting the building and the parking and everything on. Does that kind of make sense?
What happens if it comes off too fast?
If it comes off too fast,
The water when it rains.
if it comes off too fast, then we get several bad things happen. One is we can get erosion, which would erode the soils and some of our trees and some of the habitat for, you know, the animals and things that are out here. And then that soil that erodes, that silt and the stuff that comes from that also goes on to a neighbor, and it may end up in their yard. It's a messy cleanup, it's difficult to do, those type of things. The other thing that happens is the water is coming so fast that the smaller creeks can't handle it, and then it'll flood a house, or it'll flood somebody's yard, or something like that. And that, of course, is something we wouldn't want to see. And then the worst thing that could happen would be that someone, you know, would be deep enough where someone could be hurt or injured or something of that nature. So the water being retained or detained so that doesn't happen is a very, very important part of the overall design process of a site of this nature. So,
You know, our fifth graders take a test on science concepts, and one of the words is silt. So if you could help us know what silt is and show us what that looks like, that would be wonderful
we
today.
have an expert right here.
Right behind us, Gene. I think you'll see some erosion, and the silt fence is caught with some silt.
I'll tease it up well for you, Brad.
Well, sure. Well, I'll do my best, because silt is one of the soil types that we deal with. There's several broad categories of soil types, and silt is a type of soil that's really defined by its grain size and its texture. And so, where clay soil, you may all be familiar with clay soil, with, say, putty or Play-Doh. It's very very kind of sticky, and it rolls out. Gum would be kind of something that's kind of clayey in nature. And so, but that's the opposite of silt. The silt is not very sticky and not very gummy. So just kind of looking, and oftentimes it's very hard to find something that's pure one type of soil or the other. But this kind of has some properties of being silty, and a lot of times in our area it's the top soil, it's the first couple of feet of soil that's very silty. A lot of times it's dark brown topsoil at your home, for example, is usually pretty silty. The soil that they put in yards to grow grass is very silty. And if I had water, I could do a better job of describing if this was silty or not. But it's kind of you can see how it's kind of blowing away. So it's not real sticky.
Is it kind of like chalk? Like
Could
dry?
be exactly like that. Can you imagine if you put water on chalk, how it wouldn't roll?
So guys, this makes me think of those jars that we're building in class. So I don't know where each of our classes are, but my class tomorrow is actually putting a sample of soil, 3 different samples, and we're going to let them separate out so we can see all of those different layers. I know Miss Hull's class, you guys have already done that. It's going to be pretty cool. So listen to what he's saying about silt and be thinking, what do I see in those jars that reminds me of what we learned today? So make those connections.
Yeah, great.
Great questions. What other questions you guys have? Because it's better to ask the questions. I think you get more out of it. All right, right here first.
Is this black pine right here where you're building the school?
No, that's an excellent question. The school is actually going way up the hill. Did you notice the trailer that was setting up there? That's where the contractors house and have their office up there temporarily until the school is finished. And so just this side of that trailer will be the front parking lot for visitors and such, and then right behind that will be the building proper. And whenever you walk back up here or you drive back out, you'll kind of see kind of 2 layers beginning to form. An upper area and then a lower area. And the lower area is about where the gymnasium is going to set in the school. And then the upper layers, the 2 wings of classrooms, and then down below that will be another 2 wings of classrooms. So it's more just up the hill, kind of where you see some of that dirt piled up, kind of up in that general area. Yes, sir.
Why are there so many holes here?
So many holes? I mean, like okay. That you want to run with that? Compaction,
Well, sure.
sheep's foot.
Sure. That's what that is those are called sheep's foot marks. And so there's a piece of equipment that's operating. It may be behind the pickup truck there.
Yep.
You can see it. It has a roller on the front, and on that roller there are kind of sheep's feet. It's called a sheep's foot compactor. And so what it does, as it rolls over the soil, it kneads the soil together, and it's compacted. It compacts the soil. And the soil's placed loose, and it's compacted, so it's stronger.
What's the machine called?
Sheep's foot compactor, like a sheep.
And what's important is whenever they do that, they layer it. They'll lay out a thin layer, about 8 inches or so, of the soil, and then they'll go back with a sheep's foot with the right amount of water so it'll compact well, and then roll it back and forth till it's nice and compacted. And then they'll put another layer on top of that, and they'll go back and forth over that. So when you see an area like this that has 6 or 8 feet of soil that's been brought in, all that's been brought in 8 inches at a time and rolled back and forth till it's properly compacted. And Brad and his group, as they go along through that exercise, will actually come out with some equipment and actually test to see how compacted the soil is, to make sure that it is properly compacted so that we can go to the next lift. Can you tell me a little about that process?
Well, yeah, we have machines that test the density of the soil and the moisture content of the soil, and so there's a certain level of density that we're looking for and a certain level of moisture content that the contractors can control, and they have to achieve that certain specification before they can put the next lift on. And if they achieve the specification, that tells us as engineers that the soil is strong enough to support what's going to be placed over the top of it.
I see a high hand back there. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Why is the dirt different colors?
Dirt, different colors. Very cool. Well, you'll run with it?
Sure.
Yeah.
It has to do with the different minerals, and has to do with the different sort of placement. These soils have been placed here over millions of years, and so there are a lot of different things that could have taken place. As for example, when you see topsoil, you usually see it dark brown, maybe black, and a lot of the reasons that it's that color is because it has organic matter. It's usually been the top layer of soil that's been in areas that have been surrounded by trees and brush and grass, and as that material I guess dies and falls on the ground, and it decays and it causes the soil to become.
Besides minerals, what is in the soil? Or is it just chemicals?
Well, it's different particles, for example. And so soil is created a number of different ways. But mainly it's due to the weathering of rock. So if there's a mountain where there is rock, it may be sandstone, for example, and then over geological time, as it weathers, it becomes softer. In other words, when the weathering process is, there's rainfall, there's wind, there's snow and ice, and that rock degrades, becomes softer, it turns into soil. Well, sandstone turns into sand. Because sandstone is a rock that's made up of sand, and so clay would be a soil that's a byproduct of claystone, for example, something like that.
Good questions. What else do you guys think? Very good. Well, one thing that, in addition to what we're looking at here, to let you know a little bit another aspect of what like civil engineers do, and we rely heavily on what Brad does in the geotechnical and the soils engineering side, is for the building itself, each one of the foundational pieces, the footings, any of the column supports, all those things bear on the soil. And so the type of analysis that Brad will do to tell us how much a soil can support the building is different from the type of analysis that we're doing for the levee. So all throughout this entire site, the parking lot, the building, each element of the site itself, Brad's done exploration and done similar samples to go through an analysis and give that feedback to us, so that our structural engineers, who are also civil engineers, but they just focus on the vertical side of things, they do the analysis, holding everything up. Yes, ma'am.
What different kinds of soils are there?
Different kinds of soils.
Okay, good question. Well, silt is one type of soil, clay, sand. Those are basically the three broad categories of soil. Most oftentimes there's a combination of all three parts. Gravel would be another one.
We came at the right time. We just started our soil. Very excited.
Yeah.
They're going to come back with great information.
Great question.
How about from our teachers and staff, is there anything that you guys would have for us that might help segue into some of the things that they're learning or might have questions about?
The questions were kind of similar to theirs, like about the color, which I think is really important. We just talked about decomposers and how that affects, and so you talked about the organic layer and why that changes the color at the top of the soil. You answered a lot of the questions I had. Do you guys have anything that you guys wrote down? Yeah, great information, guys.
Well, in just a minute, I think they're